Laurence Edmondson and Nate Saunders back with you after a chaotic Australian Grand Prix. There were very high expectations about this race going in, I think, because everyone thought it was going to be super competitive, but it kind of just took over its own narrative and just provided something that we didn't expect. So, what do you think of the race to start with?
I mean, I thought it was unbelievable. It was probably the best opening race I can remember. I'm not going to say ever, but I mean, it's hard to think of many that had that much drama. I mean, 3 safety cars. The rain was on, it was off, it was on, and then we thought it was gone, and then suddenly it was like, no, actually there's some more coming. Because of the delays as well, it pushed us closer and closer to it. Yeah, unbelievable. And I think it really showed, the greatness of Albert Park as a circuit, really challenging for the rookie drivers. It caught out some experienced guys in Sainz and Alonso, and it gave us a decent glimpse of what is at the beginning, at the front end of the field. So yeah, as opening races go, it felt a lot more like an old school opening race. A lot of people didn't finish, a lot of drama, and yeah, just that kind of mayhem that I always associated with Albert Park. I don't know if you were the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to pick up though on what we learned from the front to start with. We will talk about the rookies and some more of the chaos later. But that McLaren performance, through it all, Lando Norris still emerged victorious. Oscar Piastri, of course, missed out on what almost certainly should have been a second place. But what did we learn about where McLaren are compared to Ferrari, Red Bull, rest of the field?
Well, the thing with that race is it's really easy to focus on the chaotic bits, the bits that were just frenetic, but actually it's those maybe more boring bits or those more routine bits where you can actually dig into it. And apart from the start, Max was aggressive off the start. I loved seeing that. He was, he really wanted to get that lead straight off the start. But in those quieter moments, once Max had made that small mistake that let Piastri back through the second, the McLarens just dropped him straight away, and it was really telling. It was almost like we kept getting a reset. It was like their lead dropped back again. They came away, and actually at the end, it would have been, if you look at it now in the cold light of day, it would have been a bit of a disaster had they not won that race. To not get the 1-2 was bittersweet, but to not get the win would have been really bad. So they looked a real step ahead of everyone else, and obviously it's one circuit, but I don't know if you felt the same. It felt pretty ominous in those moments.
Yeah, there was a point where Piastri and Norris were 16 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. So after Max made that mistake and Piastri got through, they just tore away. And I asked Max about that. I said, how concerning was that? And how surprising was that? Did you expect to stay with him? And he said, no, my tyres were going, that was the issue. And he said, look, this is one of the big things that a lot of us, as in a lot of the other teams, don't have compared to the McLaren, that ability to look after the tyres, get the performance out of a longer stint. And so that was something that came through in Bahrain, and why I think we're also impressed by McLaren's long run in Bahrain. Well, that kind of actually came to reality in this race. So bit of a concern there. But another interesting point at that time in the race was where McLaren felt the need to bring in team orders.
Yeah.
And they promised us the 2 drivers starting level.
All winter.
All winter, yeah.
Race.
We're going to let them race and all that kind of stuff into the first corner, allowed to race. But when it got to that point when Piastri was really closing on Norris, they said hold position. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this is going to be their headache all year. If they are ahead, we saw it with Mercedes when the fight is internal, and Mercedes at the time were like, well, we want to win the constructors first and foremost, and the drivers come second. They're going to have to deal with that. It was such a chaotic race. You could kind of see McLaren working the issue out in real time. You were in the Stella press conference, which I missed, but I think that question is just going to come up over and over and over again. And I think what Piastri showed is, later on with that mistake, if he wants to be in the conversation of having equal parity all year, he's going to have to race and beat Lando earlier in races, I think. And look, it was difficult because he got passed by Max early on, but that's going to be the key, I think, is Lando looks ready to win a championship based on today. He did a lot last year anyway. Piastri is going to be the one that is kind of calling for those team orders a lot more. But what did Andrea Stella say in that presser that kind of caught your eye? Because I remember you coming back and saying explanation was quite good.
Yeah, it's understandable at least. Basically, at that stage of the race, obviously they had the big lead. They didn't want to throw it away. They were coming up against traffic, so lapped cars, which creates issues. And with the track drying but still wet patches off the line and these very used, worn inters on the car, they were worried that the drivers were making mistakes. And Stella said that we could see, they were both pushing hard and they were both starting to make little errors. And so it seems that within that whole kind of papaya rules, call it what you like, rules of engagement, there is a clause that allows them to basically say, right guys, calm it down for a few laps and then we'll go once we think everything's set up. Yeah. And to be fair to McLaren, they did then later say, you're good to go again. By that point, Piastri's tyres seemed a little bit more cooked than Norris's, and he couldn't quite get it back together. But then, you know, you said the mistake with Piastri. Actually, they both made a mistake at that point.
That's true.
Norris ran off the track first, then Piastri. They hit that wall of rain. You know, that came later in the race. And then it seemed that caused some floor damage to Norris's car. They weren't 100% sure if it was then or another instant where he ran wide. But that was why they think that Max was able to close so close.
I mean, he probably needed, I know you don't get a few more laps, but had the race been a bit longer, he probably could have reeled him in a little bit.
It looked like that. And with Max as well, you always think if the move's going to be made, he's
especially on Lando to make that statement. I think he would have done it.
He played it down afterwards. He said basically, you know, the move wasn't on because it was so wet offline and it looked good for the cameras, but that was about it. But I actually think, that was closer, certainly than McLaren would have wanted and Lando would have wanted. And I think really they deserve, given the performance of that car. Now, let's just move a little bit further down to a team that was perhaps a little bit disappointing in Ferrari. The whole weekend never quite came together. Was that just not getting it right at this circuit, or is that something more worrying for Charles Leclerc and, of course, Lewis Hamilton making his debut at Ferrari?
Yeah, I mean, if coming out of there on Friday, when we spoke about it, we were stood just over there predicting Charles was going to be on pole. So I mean, it got so you know. You get it wrong, but based on Friday, and usually that FP2 is quite revealing for the rest of the weekend, that was as good as it got. It fell away really quickly. You can kind of maybe, when there's a wet race, you know, you can understand a fall away, but the fall away was also in the dry in qualifying. Both drivers said there's more to come in this car. You know, we didn't set it up properly. It seems like, you were mentioning about tyres earlier, it seems like Ferrari maybe have not quite understood what's happened there with those things, and which is strange because last year Ferrari seemed to have found some answers to that. So that will be something to follow over the next couple of races. But I think the biggest thing on the Ferrari side was that it just seemed a little bit like there was an operation that was kind of lacking in a few areas. Maybe because it's adjusting to Lewis getting there. We saw some radio messages back and forth that just seemed a bit chaotic and a bit muddled. And I don't know, it wasn't. I think all of us, we've been talking about the Lewis debut and and Charles wanting to go there and can he win before Lewis and all that stuff. It felt a bit underwhelming given all of that. And I think maybe we set expectations. I don't think they'll be that far behind McLaren every weekend. It seems like they both think that, but I think that gap to McLaren probably has surprised a lot of people. And I mean, what was it, 8th and 10th? They could have been higher. I think they were right to gamble at the end with the tyres, but just didn't seem like the weekend that we all hoped it would be for them.
Okay, quick look at the rookies. Lots of mistakes.
So many. I mean, every one of them made a mistake this weekend at some point.
I mean, Antonelli came through to take 4th place. So,
after a big mistake from him, which looked like at one point, like it, not big in the context of the other guys, but I was like, Kimi, big chance to prove yourself, and he did. To be fair, came back and did that.
So who's out of those guys? Who's facing the toughest step to get it right in China? Who's got the most pressure off that first race?
I think it's got to be the first two guys that went out, Doohan and Hadjar. I don't know which of them did the worst one. I mean, you've got to start the race, so Hadjar probably.
Formation lap. It's not pretty.
But then Doohan a close second because all the pressure on him. Home race. He's been saying, I'm going to do my talking in the car, and he does that on lap 1. Easy to do. What about you? Did any stand out? Because, I mean, Lawson also had a shocker.
Yeah, I'd say Lawson's whole weekend was particularly bad. He seems confident that there is a way out of that, that it's not as bad as it looked on paper. But I'd have to say, there was so much pressure on him going in here to just be close enough to Max, just be a couple of attempts off. And he wasn't there the whole weekend. He lost some time that wasn't his fault, practice time, but still.
And you could have taken that LAW from the timing screens and put PER there, and it wouldn't have felt like much different to last year, which I think you've got to give Liam Lawson a few races because, he's coming in the way he is. But if that becomes the norm, I think it took Red Bull 2 years to get to the position where they were going to get rid of Perez. I think the consequence of that was so big for Red Bull, and until the end, Yuki looked fantastic all weekend. He was so unlucky with what happened, with the just the way the race finished. You'd feel like Lawson's not going to get that much patience. I mean, that's just my hunch. It seems like a lot of fans already like, why is this guy in the car? Which I think is harsh at this point. But China's massive for him. I think that's, out of all those guys, him and Doohan really need to turn that around.
Okay, well, only 1 week to wait until China. I'll be flying off there tomorrow.
If you were to predict right now who's winning that race, who are you saying?
You can't look past McLaren right now. I think the advantage was that big. But a different type of circuit, we'll see if it plays to their strengths. I think McLaren are actually quite confident about China. But anyway, we'll see. And then over the rest of the season, I think that could fluctuate a bit more. But only one way to find out, and that's keep it tuned to ESPN.